Well, President Trump saying today the North Korean crisis is far from over. His statement coming one day after the rogue nation pledged to stop testing long-range missiles and also shut down its nuclear testing site. This as all eyes are on the potential summit, of course, between the president and Kim Jong Un. Joining us now for more on this is Congressman Mike Gallagher of the great state of Wisconsin. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee and Homeland Security's Committee. He served in the Marine Corps in Iraq. Congressman, welcome and thank you.
Thanks for having me.
For your service to this country. So do you think this step for the missiles and shutting down that Yongbyon site, is that enough or is it at least a first step?
Well, it's definitely not enough. I'm happy to interpret it as a positive step, but to the extent Kim Jong Un has agreed to anything, it's reversible concessions on his end. And I think serious questions remain as to whether he's serious, right? Is he serious when he talks about denuclearization? And when he talks about denuclearization, is he talking about what we're talking about or what we need to have happen, which is actually dismantlement of the program? So the good news about this being elevated to the presidential level so quickly is that we should be able to ascertain whether he's serious very quickly, and it should be a short conversation, which is to say, hey, we have the C-130s ready to go. Show us where the weapons are, and we will get them out of the country.
Do you think that he would actually give up his nuclear program? I mean, I don't think so. He sees that as his defense. That's protecting him from any type of attack.
I'm incredibly skeptical, but I also think it makes sense for the president to give him every opportunity to prove my and everyone else's skepticism wrong. I do think the strikes in Syria, let me explain this, help in the sense that it sends a message to everyone around the world, including Kim Jong Un and General Secretary Xi in China, that we are willing to take action in defense of our interests. And I also think it's critical that the president recently said he's willing to walk away from these talks. I think where President Obama really got himself into trouble with the Iranian nuclear negotiations is that it was very transparently obvious from day one that he and his administration were desperate for a deal, any deal, and were unwilling to walk away under any circumstances, and that's why we wound up with a bad deal. So if Kim Jong Un is not serious, then we can walk away and continue down the path of maximum pressure.
Well, you know, that exact point is what John Bolton told me just a few weeks ago. Ambassador Bolton, now the National Security Advisor, had been on Fox News with us here for 15 years. He told me a couple of weeks ago that it should be a short meeting if Kim Jong Un doesn't agree to some specifics. Here is Ambassador Bolton just 4 weeks ago talking about that. Listen.
I think they're very worried that, unlike Barack Obama and other of his predecessors, when President Trump says he's prepared to use military force, he means it, and he's not afraid to do it. But I think it's also consistent with the joke I like to tell, a question: how can you tell when the North Korean regime is lying? Answer: when their lips are moving. So I think they're very surprised at this.
I'm very surprised at this. I mean, it looks like the administration is very realistic and they're playing hardball. And Kim Jong Un is not used to that.
Well, I agree. I think Ambassador Bolton's joke has the added benefit of being true. For 25 years now, the North Koreans have been lying. Even when they've agreed to certain things, as they did under the Clinton administration, they agreed to stop advancing on the plutonium track, while at the same time continuing to advance covertly on the uranium track. So we have to be very skeptical. The good news is I know men like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo are clear-eyed about this. They also understand the game that the Chinese are playing here. The Chinese, while they don't want war on the Korean Peninsula, they don't want collapse, and the relationship between Xi and Kim has deteriorated, they would be perfectly happy for us to negotiate away our military presence on the Korean Peninsula, which would really damage our entire presence in the Asia-Pacific.
Yeah, it seems that Kim is accepting the 28,000 troops now. I mean, that has always been a request or a demand by them that we withdraw from South Korea.
Well, I would be very skeptical of that. I actually think what's happening here is what Kim is saying is being filtered through the South Korean government, and the current South Korean government under President Moon is very desperate for a deal. They believe in this. So I think we're getting a distorted version of what he's actually saying. Right. That would be a sea change for the Kim regime.
Yeah, and finally, quickly, if the meeting ends with the president walking out, does that necessarily mean it's a failure?
Not at all. Listen, I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface on the maximum pressure campaign in terms of the economic pressure we could put on them and on the Chinese. There's certainly more creative things we can be doing to undermine the North Korean regime, whether it's shaming them for their abysmal record on human rights, increasing rewards for defectors. But it's also a reminder that we need to continue the military rebuild that we have just started in Congress. This is going to be a multi-year effort to give diplomacy the best chance to succeed. It needs to be backed by the credible threat of military force. And we've done so much damage to our own military in recent years. We got to dig ourselves out of that hole.
You know that firsthand, having served in the battlefield in Iraq for this country, Congressman. Thank you for your service.